There are several terms that we're going to be using to describe farming processes, and we're going to define them now so we're all on the same page. Industrial or factory farming refers to farming done on a large scale and is largely machine operated. Conventional agriculture refers to the farming practices that are most common in today's food system, including use of synthetic pesticides, fertilizers, and herbicides, production of monoculture crops, and use of GMOs and antibiotics. Traditional agriculture refers to ancient farming practices or pre-industrialized farming. Organic refers to the USDA certified organic and those guidelines, which we'll talk about in more detail later. Sustainable agriculture refers to farms that focus on the ecosystem and are ecologically and health-oriented. Again, we'll get into more detail about what this means later in this presentation. But it's important to keep in mind now that organic and sustainable are two distinct categories in agriculture and are not synonymous.
Most of today's farming is done using synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides that are harmful to the environment and human health. The modern organic movement began at People's Park in the 1960s as an alternative to the industrial food system that led to monoculture crops, processed foods, and a plethora of environmental problems.
The 1989 Alar scare drastically and rapidly increased the demand for organic foods. Farmers invested in machinery and land to keep up with the demand, but when public fears subsided, the market for organic foods decreased once again. Farmers were left with debts and were forced to sell to large-scale industrial farming operations. Sudden growth in demand for organic foods without the desire for a lifestyle change also led to the industrialization of many farmers. Gene Kahn, founder of Cascadian Farms, has said that the idealistic goal of a cooperative food system simply wasn't successful, so he switched to a system that allowed him to succeed financially. Consumers just weren't willing to give up the convenience of processed products.
The movement's vision included alternative growing methods and different transportation and consumption habits. Ironically, the successful spread of the ideals the organic movement championed are what drove its industrialization. Obviously, we have moved away from the original values of the organic movement. So what does organic mean today? The USDA organic certification means that the product is generally free of synthetic substances, contains no antibiotics or hormones, has not been irradiated or fertilized with sewage sludge, was raised without the use of most conventional pesticides, and contains no genetically modified ingredients or GMOs.
There are many benefits to organic farming under these guidelines. No GMOs increases biodiversity and discourages use of monocultures, and less antibiotic use in livestock decreases the contribution to antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Organic cotton is a prime example of resource conservation in organic versus conventional farming. Organic cotton uses 71% less water and 62% less energy than conventional production. And, most importantly, organic farming shows that there is consumer interest in food production and sustainable agriculture ideals.
That being said, people assume that organic foods are always safer, healthier, and better for the environment than their conventionally farmed counterparts. But there's no guarantee that this is the case. Modern organic farming is industrialized and follows the same reductionist science mindset of conventional agriculture. The soil is pumped full of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, with little to no regard for the health of the soil ecosystem. Natural fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides are often less effective than their synthetic counterparts, so this industrial mindset leads to overuse of these materials. There are no USDA organic guidelines to regulate the volumes of these substances used on crops.
The USDA organic regulations on pesticides are particularly lacking. Approximately half of the USDA organic approved pesticides failed European Union safety evaluations. One specific pesticide, rotenone, acts by killing mitochondria in animal cells. It has been linked to Parkinson's disease in farm workers and has caused human fatalities, as well as deaths of fish in waterways. Despite the known dangers of this substance, it remains on the USDA organic list of approved pesticides.
The cost to receive USDA organic certification averages $24,000. Most local sustainable farms are small operations and cannot afford certification, despite their eco-conscious methods. To even afford certification, a farm needs to be relatively large scale, which implies industrial practices. A USDA organic certification label often tells you more about the scale of a farm's operation than its actual practices.
Journalist, professor, and author Michael Pollan summarized modern organic farms perfectly when he said, "They're organic by the letter, not organic in spirit. If most organic consumers went to those places, they would feel they were getting ripped off." Organic today is industrialized and, in many cases, causes the same harms as conventional industrial farms.
As we mentioned before, most farmers who have truly sustainable practices operate on a small scale and either can't afford the USDA organic certification or don't see it as meaningful. Sustainable agriculture practices view the farm as an organism, respecting and nurturing each element of the fragile soil ecosystem, and are much closer to the original beliefs of the organic movement.
Soil is the most important part of any sustainable farming venture. Encouraging the growth and presence of life, including bacteria, actinomycetes, fungi, algae, nematodes, and earthworms, is vital to the health and productivity of the soil. These organisms play critical roles in decomposition, providing rich layers of humus. Earthworms also aerate the soil through burrowing tunnels and bringing rich organic matter from the soil top layers to the plant roots. Bacteria and algae perform processes that make nutrients, which would otherwise be restricted, available to the plants through nitrogen fixation, sulfur oxidation, and nitrification. Encouraging soil life involves maintaining a soil pH close to neutral, keeping a balance between air and water in the soil, and ensuring that the nutrients these organisms need are provided. Industrial farming practices, be they conventional or organic, use methods and substances that damage or destroy this fragile soil ecosystem, and unhealthy soil leads to erosion and runoff.
Sustainable farming practices also involve the use of cover crops and crop rotations to improve health, while also decreasing the environmental, health, and economic costs of conventional farming methods. Both practices reduce the use of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, which in turn reduces erosion and water pollution. Crop rotations and cover crops can also relieve compacted soil by sowing plants that aerate and deposit vital nutrients.
Organic farming is a step in the right direction towards sustainable agriculture practices, but it is certainly not the magic cure-all for the damage decades of industrialized and conventional farming techniques have caused on the environment and human health. Truly sustainable farming operates locally with local ecosystems in mind. As a consumer, it is important to remember that USDA organic does not always mean sustainable and includes industrial farming methods and consequences.